packaging to beat somebody, we're packaging to beat everybody.
My expectation is we go out and dominate and create a nightmare and make people never want to play you again.
If you are a fan of another team and your coach is not out there doing everything that Kirby Smart is doing right now, you are already losing. You feel however you want to feel about that.
Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide for 4 quarters. They got to see us in our house for 4 quarters. They got to look us in the eye for 4. This is about us and our family and our house. This is about us. This is our mentality. We ain't backing down. We ain't running. Set a tone, send a message. This is our house. Physical toughness wins in football now. And if you in this room, you got it. If you come in here, you better believe in it. Because this physical toughness, it's what makes the difference. Elite focus. That's all I'm doing to the guy across from me. I'm fixing to whip his ass. Not in my box, not today. It's about us. It's about our family. We attack. You take that helmet and you strike them. And you strike them and you strike them. That's how you get respect.
Physically, I want to break them.
So Georgia football's rushing attack is in decline. All you have to do is look at the last 4 seasons. The numbers bear it out very clearly. Now, in decline relative to what they were in the national championship years of 2021 and 2022. But they're headed in the wrong direction. The question tonight that you need to ask yourself and that I'm asking myself is that good enough? Is that good enough moving forward? What they've done the last 2 years with an SEC championship in the middle of it, is that good enough moving forward, or are they going to have to do something else? That's what we're going to talk about tonight on the How About That DawgsCast. Now, we're really just going to start at the beginning because there's nowhere the place to start. We're going to go all the way back to 2021, and we're talking about the offensive line specifically here, okay? We're not talking about the overall offense. We're not talking about the running backs, although they clearly are a factor. And we're not talking about Georgia's recruiting because we all know that they're talented top to bottom on the roster. But inside that talented roster, things have shifted a little bit. Things have changed. So we're trying to look into the future here and decide, is what we've seen the last couple of years good enough? At the end of the day, nothing matters anymore, it seems, except winning in the college football playoff and national titles. Now, I'm of the opinion you can still have a great season and not win a national championship, but I digress. Tonight, we're looking at the offensive line specifically and Georgia's pursuit moving forward and winning another national championship and whether or not that's going to be good enough. So if we go back to 2021, let's set the table. Since we're talking about the offensive line in particular, the man behind that offensive line was Matt Luke. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I knew Matt Luke had a good reputation when he was at Ole Miss as the head coach, as being a good coach, an aggressive, fiery offensive line coach. But when they hired him, I didn't know exactly what to make of it. But of course, he showed up in 2021. Well, he didn't show up in 2021, but he was on the 2021 team as the offensive line coach. And this was the group he was working with. And I want you to pay attention to the names that are here. We're talking about Justin Schaefer was a starter. Jamari Salyer was a starter. Warren McClendon, a starter. Backed up, oh, by the way, by a first rounder in the NFL draft, Amarius Mims. So was Sawyer, backed up by a first rounder in Broderick Jones. Eric Warrenson got the start at one of the other positions, and Cedric Van Pran was already the starter. That unit led the Dogs to a national championship. They were coached by Matt Luke. And I was shocked, frankly, after this national championship when Matt Luke decided that he wanted to move on. Now, I'm sure there's a story there. I wish I had that story to share with you tonight. If I ever get my hands on that story or have a source that I can bring on who knows that story, we're going to have that conversation. But for tonight, let's just say that after not being sure about Matt Luke, I was sad to see him go because of the way he had coached up that unit. Now, granted, they were talented, but they had done what they needed to do, especially in that national championship game in the second half, and brought the Dogs a national championship. Now, of course, they had great running backs behind them, but that's how football works, right? It's give and take, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So, Matt Luke, out. Where does Kirby Smart turn? He turns to a familiar face to Georgia Bulldog football fans in Stacy Searles. Now, as with every coaching hire, when a new coach comes in, people are going to have their opinion. Good, bad, good enough, not good enough. Why are we doing retreads? You name it. That's the kind of stuff that comes up when you bring in a new coach. It's inevitable. But look at who he was working with in 2022. Coach Searles comes in. The cupboard is far from bare. He's got Broderick Jones, Amarius Mims at the tackle position. He's got Devin Willock or Xavier Truss at the left guard position. Cedric Van Pran returned at center. Tate Ratledge, who would go on to be an All-American, was starting at guard. He was backed up by Jared Wilson, who was going to eventually be a starter at center. And then you got Warren McClendon or Amarius Mims at the other tackle, both of which are NFL players. Another talented group. So Searles walked into a good situation. He walked into a situation where the offensive coordinator was back. The Dogs were coming off the national championship, and they rolled in 2022. 15-0, a second consecutive national title, and Stacey Searles was the man behind that offensive line. So really quick, let's go back and just look at the numbers for what happened in 2021. Under Matt Luke, the Dogs rushed for 2,864 yards. That's pretty good. They averaged 191 yards per game on the ground, 5.3 yards per carry, and they punched it in the end zone 29 times on the ground. That was under Matt Luke in 2021. That offense was good, not great. That offense was very efficient, but we knew that they could run the ball when they had to. The numbers bore it out. That was good enough for 37th overall as far as where the Dogs ranked in rush offense that season, a national championship season. If you look at 22 under Stacey Searles, the Dogs finished 19th in the nation. So statistically, they improved. They finished with 3,080 yards on the ground in 2022, 205 yards plus per game on the ground, with an average of 5.5 yards per carry, but they went into the end zone 44 times on the ground. Now, granted, you had a mobile quarterback factoring into that. They did it a couple other different ways, right? Sweeps, reverses, that kind of stuff. But the point is, on the ground, the Dogs were chewing them up and spitting them out in 2022. And we've already addressed that they've got NFL talent on that line. That 22 team was an absolute monster. The offense was better in every way, but especially on the ground. So, was that the maturity of those talented players who would eventually move on to the NFL? Was it Stacey Searles and his input, new blood, right, coming into the program? Was it a combination of that plus the great running backs that they had in 2022? Of course, it's all of it, but we're focusing on the offensive line. Now, here's where things get really, really interesting, because when we start to take a look at 2023, Searles is back. He's out there recruiting for Georgia. He's out there settling in. Everybody knows what is expected by this point in time from Stacey Searles and his offensive line. And they have a quarterback that was taking over in Carson Beck. So there was a lot of change. But one of the things that felt a little more stable was Searles' unit along the offensive line. Now, just to recall, these names that I'm giving you, these are the starting lineups for the last game in each of these seasons, okay? So in 21, that was the group that took the field against Alabama for the national title. In 22, that was the group that took the field against TCU. So in 23, this line that we're looking at here was the group that took the field against Florida State in the Orange Bowl. So we're looking at Ernest Green starting at one tackle, Fairchild at guard, Cedric Van Pran back at center, an established team leader, Tate Ratledge at guard, who would go on to be an All-American that year. And you had Xavier Truss at right tackle, or Amarius Mims when he was healthy. But by the end of the year, he chose not to play in that game. In 2023, the Dogs ran for 2,677 yards. Not bad. Really close to what they had in 2021. Georgia's season as a whole in 23 looked a lot like the 21 year, right? Undefeated regular season, 8-0 in conference play. They lose in the SEC title game, except in 23, they didn't get a chance to play for the national championship. The numbers looked about the same, a little bit lower, but very close. They averaged 191 yards per game on the ground, same as in 21. They averaged 5.3 yards per carry on the ground in 23, exactly the same as it was in 21. They even had more touchdowns than they did in 21, not quite as many as 22. They punched it in 40 times on the ground in 23. A new offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo, had taken over, but everything looked really similar to the way it had looked in 21 and 22. It just didn't break Georgia's way. So there was really no need to sound alarms when it comes to the offensive line or the offensive line coach, or to question what it was that Georgia was getting done. Searles was still out there recruiting. Here's where I should mention to you that the 2024 Georgia Bulldog recruiting class was the number one recruiting class in the country. The 2023 recruiting class for Georgia was the number 2 recruiting class in the country. Now, obviously, we're not just talking about the offensive line here. There are a lot of places along the team that got beefed up with highly rated prospects. That's why those rankings are the way they are. And that might be covering up part of Georgia's problem here, actually. Because as we look at 2024, we see the group that was expected to take the field, and then this is the group that they finished with at the end of the year. So you had Ernest Green at left tackle. You had Dylan Fairchild at one of the guards. Jared Wilson was your starting center. Tate Ratledge, who had overcome injury, was your starting guard. And Xavier Truss was starting at right tackle for you by the time the season got to the end. This was a season where the Dogs had lost twice, but they had won the SEC title game, and they were expected to do things in the playoff. But if we saw anything against Notre Dame, we saw that Georgia simply could not run the ball, and they hadn't been able to run the ball all year. And I debated and talked about it on here a lot about whether or not that was because Georgia was more of a pass-first offense and they were going to lean on Carson Beck because they thought he was the best player on that unit, and that's who they needed to be depending on. Problem there was, of course, the wide receivers didn't do a good job of helping him out. And then the running backs were injured all the time. The offensive line was injured seemingly all season long. Things just never seemed to come together for Georgia. And a lot of that is circumstantial, but at the end of the day, the numbers tell a story that isn't pretty. In 2024, Georgia rushed for 1,742 yards. That's 1,000 yards less on the ground in 24 than they had in 23. 1,000 yards, right at it. They averaged 124 yards on the ground per game in 2024. That's 70 yards, essentially, less on the ground per game. They averaged 4.1 yards per carry in 24. That's more than a yard less every time they handed the ball to a running back. And they only went into the end zone 24 times on the ground. So by any metric, 24 was a step back. All those sad sack numbers led the Dogs to finishing 102 in the country in rush offense. 102 for a Georgia Bulldogs offense that when you think about Georgia, you think about they play great defense, they run the football when they want to, and they dominate along the lines of scrimmage. That clearly did not happen in 2024 for Georgia. So, is it because of those overly inflated recruiting rankings that make us feel really good as Georgia Bulldog fans, but they weren't exactly hitting when it came to offensive linemen and elite players? Is it starting to show up when you have these injuries, when you have less than elite running backs? Is this just what you get? And then you say, is that good enough? Why did that happen? Where's the focus? I think we're going to find out a lot moving ahead into 2025 because Stacy Searles is still the man. He's still the offensive line coach at Georgia. I don't expect that's going to change unless something unforeseen happens here heading into spring practice, because they're working out now. We're about to get into the run up to spring practice. It's going to be here before we know it. Stacy Searles is the guy. Georgia's recruiting well. The last couple of years, they brought in a lot of bodies because they knew they were going to have to replenish the offensive line. The thing is, those kids weren't ready to play in 24, and we don't know exactly what they are moving here into 25. We're going to have to learn it on the field. Can Stacy, Coach Searles, can he get out there and turn this unit into the kind of unit that Georgia had in 21 and 22, where not only were they winning national championships, but they were also being considered favorites or front runners or at least contenders for the Joe Moore Award, the offensive line award that honors the best offensive line in the country. Those discussions were being had by me and other people, even though the Dogs didn't win those awards in at least the second season in 22. We thought they were flat robbed, that they should have won the Joe Moore Award. Stacey Searles was the head coach then too. So is it Stacey Searles? Is it recruiting? Is that where they're falling off? Did they miss on a player here or there? Is it because of the injuries, both to the running back position and to the offensive line? Is it because of a lack of balance in the offense? Because, yeah, Georgia's throwing it, but they weren't catching it in 24. So you can look at the statistics and say, well, Georgia was pass heavy. Well, that's fine, I guess, as long as you catch it and you're moving down the field, but that's not what happened for Georgia. And then they weren't getting it done on the ground to the tune of 1,000 yards less than they ran it in 2023. So the question for all of us as Georgia Bulldog fans to answer is that good enough? I think Coach Searles, Kirby Smart, they've earned the right to go out there, put this unit together, show up in 25 and show us, right? But Kirby's already made his choice, at least for the time being. He's looking at things we're not looking at. He's looking at it holistically. And he seems comfortable with his offensive coordinator. He seems comfortable with the bodies he has in that room, the offensive line room. He seems comfortable with Stacey Searles as his offensive line coach. So, as fans, we just get to sit back and see what they can turn it all into. Will they be able to show up in 25 and get back closer to what they were in 21, 22, even 23? Because you don't have to lead the country in rushing to be a national championship team. But what you do have to be able to do is run an offense that's balanced, that gives you the opportunity to run it when you want to run it, and gives you the confidence to know that you can run it when you have to run it. That's what Georgia has to be able to do. We all know that Kirby Smart wants to play complementary football, that he wants his offense to help his defense, that he wants his defense to help his offense and his special teams to help them both. I think that the talent that has been brought in along the offensive line deserves the opportunity to get coached up and go out there and show us what they're capable of here in 2025. If Coach Searles and Coach Smart are able to turn this unit back into something closer to what we saw in 23, then Georgia's future is going to be bright because there are new weapons all over the field, regardless of who's taking snaps at quarterback. We know that this is going to be a season of change in Athens. There's no two ways around it. But just because things are new, just because change is happening, that doesn't mean that it has to be bad. It just means that it's going to be different. And this unit has every opportunity to go out there and show us just exactly what they're made of. Now, they're going to have to grow up kind of quick. The first couple of games of the year are going to give them an opportunity to get their feet wet. We're going to actually get to see a lot of these young players, I would imagine. And then by the time we get into week 3 and 4, you have Alabama and Tennessee coming to town. The Dogs are going to have to be right if they expect to win those games. They're going to be challenged because that Tennessee game's on the road. They're going to be challenged because that Alabama squad is probably a top 10 preseason team. They feel pretty good about their opportunities as well. Yeah, we know it's going to be crazy in Athens for that game. That has to help Georgia. But it doesn't matter how loud or how boisterous the home field is if you can't block them up front, if you can't run when you want to, if you can't protect the passer. So, Coach Searles has to get it right. Kirby Smart has made his choice. That's his guy. That's who he's betting on. And if Georgia's going to get back, remain a contender for the SEC title, and get back to being a contender for national championships, it's all going to come down to what they can do along the lines of scrimmage and specifically along the offensive line, because Georgia has to reverse the trend from what we've seen between 2021 and 2024. The question is, do they have the talent and the ability to do it? Do they have the connection? Do they have all those intangibles? Can they stay healthy? Again, I don't think it's all in any one coach. But I will say that what we saw in 2024, regardless of the reasons it happened, what we saw from Georgia in 2024 along the offensive line, their level of play, their style of play, the attitude that we watched them play with, that's not good enough. Searles knows that, I think. Kirby Smart definitely knows it. But I think he also knows what he has in that room. And that's why I'm willing to sit back, see what they can show us in the spring, look forward to what we see in 2025. But if things don't improve, what we've seen so far, the trajectory of the team, the trajectory of the offensive line, not good enough. Frankly, the trajectory of the recruiting on the offensive line, not good enough. And if we don't see a turnaround in 2025, then I will be among those voices who are saying it's time to look for a change at the offensive line coach position. Because Georgia can't be who and what they want to be if they can't dominate along the offensive front. And that starts with players, and then it comes back to coaching, execution, and attitude. Injuries are a part of the game. That happens everywhere. Georgia, under Kirby Smart, will always go attempt to get the best players they can get out of the high school ranks year after year after year. The recruiting rankings show that. The recruiting rankings show us that. So, at some point, you have to hold the people who are in charge of those individual rooms accountable. And if you want to drill down a little bit deeper, if the trajectories continue, then you have to have a real conversation about the offensive coordinator position as well. That we can leave for another day. But as far as the offensive line is concerned, what we saw in 2024, not good enough. But I am willing to give them free reign here in 2025 to go out there and show me, because I know they're young and I have high hopes that the coaches know what they're doing and they're going to be able to pull this thing back to more of a 2023 level or better. Because when you've got Nate Frazier and other backs that have the ability to break the game open anytime they touch the football, that can make any offensive line look better. So we'll see how it all shakes out. I'm looking forward to it. One thing is for sure is that Georgia turns out top quality players, and the way they do things at Georgia is a little bit different than the way they do things everywhere else. And if you don't believe me, that kind of thing matters. If you didn't know, there was a big game that took place this last weekend in the professional ranks. It's called the Super Bowl. The Eagles, the Chiefs were in it. The Eagles wound up winning that thing. And I was happy to see that happen for a couple of different reasons. But nothing made me happier than what I heard in the week leading up to the game and then was borne out during the game. If you missed it, I'm going to play that for you now about exactly what made the Eagles different this year, why they were different than they have been in years past, and then ultimately we know how that led to a world title. Check it out.
A lot of players said that this year's team is far more connected than last year and even the team that went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. What have you seen in terms of that connection, and why is that so important?
Well, I say to that, I think a big part of it has to do with the Georgia background on defense. You know, and I think that starts with Kobe Dean and all those guys that were able to play ball in college together and bring their ways to the league. And so I think that has a big impact on our culture, on defense, how they play, how together they are. And then I think that kind of seeps through the team in many ways.
There you have it from the man himself, the Super Bowl MVP and newly minted world champion Jalen Hurts. He let you know that what the Eagles did in drafting all those Georgia Bulldogs, affectionately known as the Philly Dogs, what difference it has made in a professional program up there. I think what we can take away from this as Georgia Bulldogs fans is that A, Kirby Smart knows how to evaluate talent. B, they know how to develop players once they get them on campus. All you have to do is look at Jordan Davis, who's right there in the middle of this picture. But more than that, it shows you that Kirby Smart is a relentless recruiter, and he understands that having the best players usually means you're going to have an opportunity to end up as the best team. But more than that, it's leadership. It's the way you get after it. It's the way you go about your business. Those standards that I talked about in a recent episode. That is what this group you see on the screen here are all about, especially Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith. This is what made Georgia great when they were here. It's what has made Philadelphia great in the NFL. And it's not hokey. Even though those guys are all professionals now, there's nothing hokey about it. If you buy into it and you're playing for the person next to you and you go about your work in the way that a champion goes about their work day after day, even though you're not winning a championship every time you step on the practice field, if you hold yourself to that standard and you push to achieve that standard and demand it from the person beside you, well, eventually that's all going to break through and everybody's going to see that, you know what, that's not a bad idea. I think I want to do it that way too. And moving forward, when you lose players like this out of a program the way Georgia has, as much as Kirby informs us that they have great leaders on these teams each year, that somebody steps up, I'm certain that happens. I have no doubt that's true. But these dudes clearly had a little bit of something extra when it came to those intangibles. That's part of what made Georgia different. And you don't just grow those dudes on trees, but you can go recruit them. They are out there, and Kirby and his staff are chasing them down. So if there's anything that I have full faith in, it's that Kirby and his staff are going to go get the best high school recruits they can get every year. And they know what they're looking for. You just saw the model of what it looks like to be a Georgia Bulldog. That's the kind of person that they're looking for to bring into the program. So as long as that's going on under Kirby Smart, I really don't have any major concerns about the program, where we're headed and what we are. But it is so good to see that these young men didn't just do that at Georgia, that it became, if it wasn't a part of who they were, it added to who they became. And then they took it with them moving forward. And now they're champions again. So congratulations. One thing that I want to say is we're still trying to be champions over here on YouTube. So make sure, double check that if you haven't subscribed, I hope we've earned your subscription. If you're not sure, I hope you'll check and make sure you're a part of the pool, because we love to have you over here. We're trying to get to that magic number of 10,000 sooner rather than later. And as always, you can also find us over on the podcast in the audio only version if you just needed to put us in your back pocket and take us with you. And don't forget to sign up for the Ring the Bell newsletter. The link is in the description below. Jump on down there. It's where you're going to find out first about everything that I have going on here in 2025. Lots of changes. So if you want to stay on top of it, that's how you do it. Sign up for that newsletter. Costs you nothing, but you will get all the cool information first. And there is a freebie over there. If you want it, you can grab that while you're there too. And I want to take a chance here to say thank you to all the people who have chosen to go above and beyond to be channel members here on the YouTube channel. I appreciate you above and beyond more than I can tell you. Thank you so much for being here. It's always a good time to see you pop in the chat. So, is Georgia good enough on the offensive line under Coach Stacy Searels? Is this what we should expect moving forward, or are there going to have to be changes made? I am one who is not calling for changes right now at that position. Certainly, Kirby's already made his choice. He's rolling with Mike Bobo and Stacy Searels moving into 2025. Given the fact that they're having to turn that unit over so much, and a lot of those recruits that they brought in the last couple of years were pretty highly touted. Not 5 stars necessarily, but highly touted individuals, I am more than willing to give them a chance to go out there and show me that they can coach them up, and Georgia can get back to being more of what I want them to be, what I know them to be, what I saw them be in 2021, 2022, and then in 2023. But the trajectory is headed in the wrong direction, and that is something that Stacy Searels, Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, they're all going to have to get turned around. Otherwise, we aren't going to be able to be talking about SEC championships, much less a national championship, again, anytime here soon. That's all for this week. Thank you for being here. Y'all take care of yourselves, your friends, your families, each other, and go Dogs! All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being in here with me. Thank you so much for being in here with me. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. This was a week where, looking at the offensive line specifically, after having talked about some of the different stuff that we've talked about here the last few weeks. So if you're showing up every week, I hope you see the theme of what we're doing here. We're walking through everything to try to lay it out for you about where we have been, where we are, where I think we might be going. And when I looked at these numbers in the rush game specifically, I understand that it comes back to, of course, Mike Bobo as the offensive coordinator. And Coach Smart has his philosophy about how he wants to run everything, how he wants everything to fit together. But when you look at what Georgia's doing in the run game specifically, when you have numbers that drop off the way they did from 23 to 24, they were stark, and it gets your attention, and it needs to be talked about a little bit. And I don't think I'm the only one who's talking about it right now. I think that there are other people in this space who have shared their opinions on it. But those numbers, 1,000 yards less overall, 16 fewer touchdowns on the ground in 24 than in 23. I get that there are injuries, and, not in just one area, but in multiple positions that impacted this. But it just wasn't the kind of year that you expect to see from a Georgia Bulldogs football team. Coming into it, I sat right here and said this unit has at least four preseason All-America on it. This offensive line, nobody expected Georgia's offensive line to struggle the way they did in 2024. Nobody. Not people in the local media, not people in the national media, not the coaches. You had a group coming back that was talented and veteran. No one thought it was going to look the way it looked in 2024. Even when everyone was healthy, one of the things I was really concerned about was the attitude that it felt like Georgia was playing with. And that's a tricky kind of thing, because there were moments when I watched them and they looked like nasty road grading offensive linemen of Georgia's past. But then there were other times when it looked like they couldn't get out of their own way. They talked about execution a lot. They talked about, we're just missing it here or there, timing, those sorts of things. And all of that's valid and true. But at the same time, I just wish I had seen more of that aggressive nastiness that I'm used to from this group. And the only thing that I can come back to as far as that is concerned is Coach Stacy Searles. So is he a different coach in 24 than he was in 22? No, he's not. I know he had some health challenges. I know he had to step away for a little while over the last two seasons. He missed a little bit of time. Nothing too serious, but he's the same coach. So does that mean that he is essentially a placeholder of a coach? Meaning, what I mean by a placeholder of a coach is he just going to get as much as the players are willing to give him out of each of them? Or can he raise their level of play? Because in 22, he had a team full of first rounders, right? NFL draftable players on his unit. And they went out and played like it, and they won games in a national title. In 23, he still had talent. He still had NFL players, but he didn't have as many. And they didn't perform quite as well in those intangible ways, those nastiness kind of ways, the kind of thing where you lean on somebody in the fourth quarter just because it's fun. It didn't feel like that's who Georgia was in 23. And then in 24, it wasn't that way at all, as even more of those players moved on. Now, there are guys on this team in 24 that are going to go play in the NFL. They're going to get drafted. They're going to be signed as free agents. They're talented. So is it that Coach Searles didn't lift them up, didn't demand more out of them? Or was it simply that they were beat up to the point where it didn't matter? Right? They just weren't healthy enough to be who they needed to be, who they wanted to be. Could be the case. Could be the case. I don't know. And that's why I'm willing to wait on what's going on here in 2025. I'm willing to wait and see these new faces, because they're big, and the undercurrent around their recruitment was that they not only were big, but they were athletic and they were nasty. They were physical. That they had those things that I'm talking about that you can never truly quantify. So we will see. We will see if Coach Cyril's can get them to play to that level. We'll see if they actually go out there and move other humans consistently. Or is it that Georgia's going to have to just recruit at such a high level that a placeholder coach is good enough? Because this year, Georgia signed, according to one recruiting service, their first 5-star offensive lineman, Juan Gaston. Their first one in the last 2 or 3 cycles. Say that again. Now, their first 5-star offensive lineman in the last 2 or 3 cycles. So, is it just a talent thing? Georgia's good, but not elite. We'll see. We'll see. Because they're going to have to go out there and show us. Like I said, they get to open up against a couple teams that should let them get their feet wet, and then you line up against Alabama. And then you go on the road and you line up against Tennessee. Texas is on the schedule down the road. So there's a lot happening there. And it's going to be interesting to see how they come together. But I'm here for it. I'm looking forward to it. And what about Jalen Hurts stepping up there in front of the world media, because that's what shows up at the Super Bowl, and saying that he thinks one of the keys to why the Philadelphia Eagles were able to win the Super Bowl this past Sunday was because of the change in culture that the Philly Dogs brought when they came to play for the Eagles. Every year, when we get past the season, when we get into interviews at the Senior Bowl, when we get into interviews at the NFL Draft Combine, you hear these stories about how Georgia's different, about how the way they practice is different, or the team culture is different, or, they're just so much more talented than everybody else. Every year you hear this, but it seems to always come from a different angle. One year it's the head guy at the Senior Bowl saying Georgia they're different because of this reason. And then you'll have coaches at the NFL Combine say something, or you'll have players show up and show out at the NFL Combine, and you're like, man, Georgia just showed us why they're different, But every year they show up. We get these statements. We get these quotes. This stuff leaks out, and it is just impressive. So again, having a great football team is like making a good pot of gumbo or a good pot of soup, You got to mix it all together to get it come out right. It's not always right. It's never bad at Georgia these days. I mean, Georgia has won more games since the turn of the century than every college football team save one, and that would be Ohio State. And even with that, I'm not throwing Ohio State a bunch of roses, because to me, just watching the Big Ten over those years, most of those wins were against, tomato can teams. Just the way I see it. And Georgia, since the year 2000, has won more games than everybody else. And the difference isn't much. It's like, 6 or 8 games total. You're telling me that the fact that Ohio State gets to play, Army, Navy, those kind of schools, Toledo, whatever it is, consistently, and then really, really bad Big Ten teams, year after year, and that's how they're rolling up their win totals. Forgive me if I'm not blown away, right? I'm giving Georgia a lot of credit right there, because I understand there are people up that way, up north, who are going to say, well, the SEC East is weaker and Georgia was in the East forever. Okay, you can miss me with all that because of the way the SEC as a whole performed over that time, winning 15 out of 17 national championships. And then Georgia, even if they were winning the East, were having to cross over and play those teams out of the West, both in traditional rivals as well as in the championship game. So miss me with all that. It's not the same. These two things are not the same. Again, just my opinion, but that's why I'm here, right? Is to share my opinion with you. So there's that. So anyway, things aren't bad at Georgia. The soup's not bad, right? But is it like the best it could be? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about Georgia and this offensive line. But Georgia finishing 102nd in the nation in rushing is not a number that I had, anywhere on my 2024 bingo card. And hopefully we're not going to see that again here in 2025. And again, if they just handle their business, if they show up, if they practice, if they are at all what we've been told they are in that room, then 2025 is going to be all right. They're going to reverse this trend if the Dogs get just a little bit healthier at running back, right? At offensive line. If the receivers catch just a few more passes, it's going to change the way defenses, it all fits together in this big soup. So that's why we watch football. That's why I love it. That's why I love talking to you guys about it, because I know you guys fully understand it. But because we fully understand it, we have the opportunity to then drill down a little bit and have a discussion about exactly who and what Georgia is and what they can be moving forward. So there you have it. That's overtime for tonight. I haven't seen a lot of people chiming in with questions or anything from the chat, so I hope everybody's doing good over there. Herman Raj is in here. Tim's in here with Noah. Carol, good to see you guys. Who else is in here? Raj is in here. What's up, Raj? Who else did I miss off the top? The Real Too Smart. Good to see you if you're still here, man. It's good to see you hanging out for a minute. I appreciate it. Glenn County in the house. Jeremy Nix popped in for just a minute. I hope that sweatshirt's fitting you well, Jeremy. I hope you're getting some run out of it, given that we're getting back into some cooler weather here. I was looking at some longer distance, like week plus weather models today, because I'm that kind of guy. I'm a bit of a weather nerd. It's one of the things I enjoy. It's going to be cold. It's going to stay cold. We're that week and a half we had where it was like 70 degrees, and the weather was beautiful. Hope y'all enjoyed it, because it's going to be cold again. There's an outside chance for some more weather coming our way, wintry weather. So down here in Georgia, so y'all, bust out those hoodies. Don't let them go anywhere. I keep mine close this time of year because, it's been a cold winter. All right, y'all. I don't need to keep you. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I'm trying to decide, though, before I let you go, here in the spring, summer, how I can do another show. So I'm considering like a Sunday evening, maybe doing a Sunday evening thing where, not necessarily, hardcore talking football necessarily, but more of a hangout kind of situation where we can keep Georgia as a through line, maybe talk about news of the week or something like that. But for that kind of show to work out, it would lean heavily on the chat. So it would lean heavily on you guys interacting and, asking questions potentially or bringing up topics. And again, it would be more of just a hanging out kind of thing, like a good fun time show. So we'll see. Sundays might work out for us. I'm not sure. Sundays might work out. I don't know. Would anybody be interested in a Sunday show? Because that's one of the things that I'm considering. But I don't know. We'll see. It's all coming together. I have ideas and I'm trying to nail it down. It's like putting Jell-O on a wall. You know what I mean? I see you in there, Carol, saying that you're a weather geek too. I tell you, I love it. Do you have a favorite weather personality, or not necessarily somebody who's on TV, but like a weather something that you follow here on YouTube? I have a couple that I enjoy here on YouTube that they're knowledgeable, they're trained, but it's not like they are meteorologists on some newscast or something. But they choose to do a YouTube channel to talk about, again, not forecasts necessarily, but like the longer range forecasts and models and why it's happening the way it's happening and stuff. So I really enjoy that. And it's cool because in America, we are a continental country, right? So like we have more tornadoes than anybody else in the world. We have crazy winter weather. We have hurricane season, which is a big deal. Of course, we have drought and fire season, which is something that we have to contend with as well. And there's always something when you're a weather person that you can, if you're having something you're bored in your other parts of your life, you can be like, what's the weather doing? And pay attention over there for a minute. So who showed up tonight thinking we were going to be talking about weather? Nobody. Let's see. Are the viewerships dropping? No, you guys are hanging in here with me. I appreciate that. Ryan Hall. You like Ryan Hall and James Spann, huh? I like Spann. I don't really watch Ryan Hall. Nothing against him. He's not one of my people. I know I've seen some of his stuff. He seems like a fun watch. I just haven't watched him. So, but I do know who he is. He's got like a big channel on here, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I do like James Spann though. He's cool. There's a fellow that I've been watching, especially being here in the Southeast, right? There's a fellow, Mitch West, who is not he's not a like meteorologist. But I watch his stuff because he's a good conversation, like it's like we're talking to each other when I watch his stuff, which is cool. And there are some other people. But yeah, I do enjoy watching weather content here on YouTube when I'm not talking about the dogs. Y'all would be amazed. Like, y'all know I don't watch like the podcasts and stuff on here because I'm not trying to cross over anybody else's talking points or anything like that. But it's just the weirdness of the algorithm, but I'm finding that I'm having to go looking for more Georgia people to check out. It's hard for me to find anybody that's not like in the media. And by the media, I mean any of the beat writing sites, like our friends over at UGAsports.com or Dog Post or any of those places. They obviously have channels and they put out the kind of content they put out. But that's different than somebody like me showing up and talking about Georgia the way I do all the time and not really focusing on anybody else. So is it just me that's having a hard time locating other Georgia fans that are doing anything similar to what I'm doing? And I understand that what I'm doing is different. And I also understand that a lot of people think, well, the season's over, so there's nothing to talk about. Well, frankly, y'all know I don't think that. So I'm just curious, is it just me that's having a hard time finding things to watch around Georgia that's not the media stuff? And I don't watch, and again, this is not hate shade or anything else, but I don't watch the AJC Dog Nation channel. I know they do a podcast every day. I guess that's what they call it. In the mornings, they do a live stream, but I don't watch that. Because if I'm going to watch somebody that's in the media that's covering the team, then I just choose to watch other things. I'm speaking about watching, your average fan who might have a channel. So I don't know. Y'all aren't helping me out. I don't see it in the comments. So maybe y'all are having a hard time with it too. But I definitely am having a hard time with it. So that's how I end up watching weather and all that kind of stuff too. So, lots of good stuff. So as always, I hope everybody out there is doing good. I'm doing good. We're doing okay. My girls are healthy, so we're happy about that. I'm again here in 2025. This is all going to look a little different, and I can't even tell you exactly how it's going to look different, but I can tell you it will. And I have to trust the guys and ladies who show up here consistently to let me know exactly when I'm off the beaten path, because there's a large part of me that wants to talk about more than just Georgia football. But I don't know if that's what this channel or this space should be. Like, I don't know if y'all care at all about what I'm doing and like when I'm not sitting right here doing this. You know what I mean? Like, if you care about those things, let me know. You know, if you would find it interesting or if you care, because I don't want to bore you guys with that. I don't want to show up here and drop in stories, you know, about my girls or whatever if y'all don't care. So if you're just here for football and that's what you want to talk about, then cool. I can keep doing that. But maybe there's some other stuff that we can be doing, because in those hangouts, you never know where they're going to go. You know what I mean? The conversations could go anywhere. Stuff could happen during the stream, and you take the whole thing a different way. So that'll be interesting too, to see how all that goes. Hey, Brayson's in here hanging out, lurking. I don't know if you just showed up or if you just showed up or if you've been here the whole time, but it's good to see your name in the chat there, friend. And Carol, I see your message to Joe. He's fine. He's fine. He's, doing his thing. He's living his life. And I will tell him that he's missed. You guys, y'all would make him turn red. I know there's more than one of y'all on here that likes to see Joe. I know Tim has asked about him a couple of times, and maybe Joe would join us for those conversations. Maybe if we do hangouts, like I was saying about like a Sunday, maybe Joe would show up. Maybe he's free and he would want to do something like that. I'll just have to ask him. I'll just have to ask him. And it's also weird because there aren't a lot of, and I don't know if I talked about that here already or not, but it just seems like there haven't been a lot of Georgia people that have reached out to me recently. And I don't know why that is necessarily. So it's not like I've been invited to go show up on other people's shows or anything like that in the Georgia world. So maybe they're just like not interested in what we're doing over here, and that's okay. Crappie fit. Okay, Wayne, help me out now. I grew up and the crappie was the thing that we fished for most when I was growing up. Now, are there crappie fishing channels on YouTube here specifically, like about crappie? Because it's YouTube. Of course, there probably is. I've never looked. That's pretty cool, though. Now, when I was crappie fishing a lot, I was just with my dad and my brother, and we would run out there and, we'd go find us a bridge, get up under the bridge and fish for crappie, and then we have a good time. But I don't remember anything about it other than just being out there with my dad. You know what I mean? Like I was young. Is there a technique to crappie fishing? Y'all can help me out. I really don't remember. I don't know. And I haven't been fishing a lot here over the last few years, especially since my girls were born. So as I got older, I fished for other stuff, specifically, catfish and occasionally bass and stuff like that. But when I was little, man, we fished for those crappie all the time. So that's cool. That's cool, Wayne. Thanks for chiming in. But if you have any insight, I'd love to know. And if you have a crappie fishing channel that you'd like to recommend, I'm all ears, because I'll definitely go check it out. That'd be cool. Tim's in here. He seems to like the idea. I assume maybe you're talking about Joe coming on for the Sunday night thing. And like I said, it's great to see Brayson in here. All that stuff. I watched the Super Bowl on Sunday, but I did more than watch it. I was working the Super Bowl. So like when I'm working a game, it's different than just sitting back and watching. You know what I mean? Like I just see it completely differently than a fan just watching the game. So it was awesome to get to watch the game play out the way it did. And frankly, I was not surprised at all about how it went. And I know people might call me on that and be like, well, you didn't make any prediction videos or anything. True, because I don't cover the NFL. Like it's not what I'm doing. But I just, having watched Kansas City play all year and then seeing the way the way their year went, and then watching Philadelphia and knowing what they had cooking on the defensive side, the way it went down in the Super Bowl, I wasn't surprised. And then once they started to get it rolling like that, I was like, yeah, this is kind of over. But at that point, I could just sit back, especially working the game. I could just sit back and really enjoy the fact that Philadelphia was able to get after Mahomes in that offense the way they did without blitzing, right? I got to watch great football players play great, if you know what I mean. Like when I'm on here and I'm talking about humans moving humans and playing defense, winning a box, because it's about your attitude. It is about your physicality and the level of player you are, but all these players are great, right? They're in the Super Bowl. They're great players. And then it comes down to those intangibles. And that's why I wasn't surprised, because when I knew what the Eagles were. I knew what they were. And they bullied that offensive line for Kansas City. They bullied Patrick Mahomes. And frankly, it was fun to see. Like, I was loving it. I picked, and Joe will verify this for you when he comes back on here eventually, but I told him, like, the Eagles are going to win this game. Like, it's not going to be that kind of game. Like, the Eagles are going to win it. It's not going to be like, the first thing that was flashing through my mind, who's old enough to remember when Joe Montana and the 49ers had it rolling and the Broncos they could get to the Super Bowl, but they couldn't win it. And they went out and played the 49ers and got housed. But that time it was Steve Young against the Broncos. But they went out there and got housed against the 49ers, like 55-10 or something insane like that. And I mean, like, that's the way this game felt to me. Like, the whole time, I'm like, they're just going to go out there and they're clearly better, But nobody wanted to hear that leading up to the game. It was all the talk of three-peat this and Mahomes is the greatest that. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see on Sunday. I mean, and it played out the way it played out. So when it goes down that way and I get to actually watch great players play great and impose their will on other superb players, then I feel really good about, the way I felt going into the game. Like, I'm like, there you go. That's what happens. I mean, did you catch the video on social media bouncing around where Travis Kelce was trying to do what Travis Kelce always does and bump his gums and talk and all that stuff on the field? And that's fine. It's part of the game. But then he rolled in against the Eagles and he's walking up to, Jalen Carter, and he's walking up to Jordan Davis, and he's trying to shove them out of the way, and they're like not moving at all. They're just like, what are you doing? Go away. Like, you need to take that on back to the huddle, because you're not going to do that to those big men. Not only because they're so physically large, but because they were dictating the game in every way, emotionally, in the trash talk, in the physicality of the thing, in every way. Travis, go away. That's a different animal. You got straight bullied. Your quarterback got straight bullied. That's how it goes. And that's bringing it back to Georgia. That's why you win. You've got great players who then have an edge to them, an attitude that's like, dude, I'm me and you're you, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's what happened in the Super Bowl on Sunday. And that's what happened a lot of times when Georgia had those dudes on the field. I mean, that's just the way it is. So the brilliant part of that is that when it's your guys, it's fun to watch. And then when those dudes aren't there, we as Georgia fans who have watched all this up close are now looking back at this Georgia team, who is a really good team, and we're like, yeah, but they're not that. Fair and not fair. You know, that's just the reality. Of course they're not that. So Kirby's got to go get those dudes again. You know, and as Georgia fans, ultimately, we have to decide, do we trust him to go get those dudes again? I don't know. I do. I think they will. But because of things like portal and NIL and those sorts of things, that 21 defense, where you see 3 of those dudes on the depth chart all the way across the board, those days are gone unless things change. And it will be interesting to see what happens because revenue sharing is coming this summer. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how that changes. I mean, if it changes, it may not, because I still don't know all the ins and outs, you know? So like if you've got revenue sharing and then you can still throw money on top of that at players, if that's how it goes, then nothing's going to change really. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe if guys are sure that they can get a bigger piece of the pie because of revenue sharing, then maybe they're going to be less likely to look around in the first place. And I know a lot of people, I haven't talked about it here at all, but I know a lot of people were like shocked when they found out that Justice Terry took the money to go to Texas, like shocked. And I don't count me among them, not shocked. I mean, it is a punch in the nose when you recruit a kid for, 6 years and then he just walks away because somebody gives him more money. That's a punch in the nose. It doesn't matter how you color it. But, I mean, listen, I might be wrong. Could be completely wrong because maybe the young man wants to go and see more of the world and, do his own thing, and more power to him. I'm not banging on him for taking the money. It just feels like if that's the reason you chose to go, unless they're going to keep doing that for you every time you start to think about home, which they might, it feels like a money grab because you hadn't seen that kind of money, and who can blame you? But that at the end of the day, your heart might win out and mama may call and you might have to come home, right? And you might decide to transfer back to Georgia. I don't know. Could happen though. Could happen. I mean, because a kid from Georgia who only ever knew Georgia, with the freedom that they're allowed in movement these days, who knows? I would not be shocked at all if we learn that Justice Terry eventually decides to transfer. And if he does, I would be stunned if he didn't come back to Georgia, right? That somebody else was going to do something that was going to make him go somewhere else. But with that said, he chose money once. If he's playing well and somebody offers him more money, he might choose money again. But A, I wouldn't be shocked if he chooses to transfer, and B, I would not be shocked at all if that place was Georgia, to come back to play at Georgia. So, but all that speculation, who knows? I don't. But thanks for listening to it. I appreciate y'all being here with me. We got a few new people popping in here. Thanks for checking us out. But I'm going to put a bow on this tonight. Guys, I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. I just can't say that enough. January was a long year. Let me put it that way. And to get to come here and talk about stuff that I want to talk about with people that I know want to hear it, that's a good feeling. So thanks, y'all. I appreciate it very, very much. Until next time, y'all take care of yourselves, your friends, your family. Take care of each other. And I'm going to say it. Go Dogs!